You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and very happy to have Spencer Fleury on the show. Hey, just wanted to welcome him on to the show before we drop into some cool art and philosophy stuff.
Hey, thank you very much. It's great to be here finally.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. Listeners, prior to getting on the show, we were just talking about how some basic things can be simple. I had some technical issues, and the world seems more difficult than it was, or at least we're expressing that. But within that, we got art and philosophy, and we got your writing. I'm really excited to have you blast into a fun event, a fun happening in an author's life. New book coming out. I Blame Myself, but Also You, which love the title. Thank you for the title.
Thank you.
But drop into that. Tell us what's shaking with that. When the book's out.
The book is out pretty soon, actually, July 2nd. It comes out from Malarkey Books. If you're interested in picking up a copy after listening to this podcast, which I'm sure is going to be amazing and scintillating and very persuasive.
Yes.
I would recommend visiting malarkeybooks.com, ordering from the publisher directly. You can also get it at pretty much any independent bookstore. If they don't carry it, you can have them special order it. And I mean, if you must, there is that online giant that sells everything and undercuts mom and pop stores all over the place. It's not my preference, but if you want to, that's where you can find it as well. So yeah, it's an exciting time. It's one of those times in my life where I feel like I should be feeling a little different than I am, to be totally honest.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, it's obviously a very exciting moment for any author to have a book coming out, especially with a really a hot publishing house like Malarkey. They've been putting out banger after banger for the last couple of years, and I'm really honored to be a part of that. But man, there's just that nagging self-doubt. There's that part of your brain that is just constantly trying to undercut you and make you worry about things that are beyond your control. What if it doesn't sell? What if I never get a chance to publish a book again? What if everybody hates it and everyone's just been lying to me about how good they think it is? I can't shut that up, and so it's kind of acting as a check on the the more exuberant feelings that I'm experiencing, which will around finally pushing this piece of art out into the world after all these years.
Yeah. Hey, Spencer, I've been talking to a lot of authors lately, and just about the show and the podcast. I get to as you know, explore a lot of different areas, and there's these kind of sequences that I think are wonderful as a creator, where there's a particular style or artist or writers, but I've been deep into kind of writer's mind in publishing, and it amazes me what an accomplishment and dedication to the craft it is to get to the point that you are. And I just want to pull that out because
Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite the thing. But one really cool thing is I talk on a show philosophy, I for me everything's writing, everything's novels, and I don't know. I say it with authors, and I mean it. But like when I was a kid, that was it. That was what were the big things in art? What were the things that attracted me? What worlds did I go to? It was all through books, science fiction, and all that. And having studied literature, so for me, even though I concentrate nowadays on labor issues and philosophy and art in and of itself, books hold this like just incredible attraction to me. And being able to talk to authors more regularly recently, taking a look at, I'm reading more poetry, I'm reading more short stories, I'm getting into these presses, and like you were talking about with Malarkey, like the idea, sometimes we get tired of the world that there's nothing new. And then whether in music or in books or in small publishers, you're like, holy shit, what's the problem? There's real things going on here. And I love that within writing. Talk to me about this volume and working with this press, and also um, what this particular book means to you.
Absolutely. Well, this is having a short story collection, I think, has always been the main goal for me, or at least I view it as a milestone. And I think I always have set it up as a milestone ever since I first developed an interest in writing fiction, which was long before I actually developed an interest in putting in the work to write fiction. But eventually that came around and followed as well. But I've always wanted to have my own short story collection. That is, again, that's where I also started to really develop an interest in literature through the form of the short story. Um, so I've been writing short stories. I put all of these, after I'd had a sufficient volume of work published or otherwise, I looked at that and I just thought, I wonder if I've got enough here that I can pull the best ones and pull some really good ones and have them all be talking to each other in conversation with each other to make sort of a coherent collection of stories. And so I worked with a few people to help me sort through that and figure it out. Um, I sent this manuscript out. I recently counted, I've forgotten the exact number, but I think it was 116 times. I've got 116 rejections for this manuscript. And when I sent it to Malarkey, I was basically at the point where I didn't really know if enduring that further for this particular book was going to be worth it to my mental health.
Yeah.
So I sent it to Malarkey. At the time, they were brand new. They had maybe 2 titles out. So I didn't know anything about them or whether they were even going to end up being a viable home for my work or anybody's work. It took a while. It took over a year, really, for Alan to get back to me. But I mean, that's not a criticism because Malarkey's a one-man show. He built an entire press while my manuscript was in the queue, and it's fine. That's how this works with indie presses, is because they can't afford a staff, they can't afford anything other than making the books and paying the authors most of the time, and that's really where it should be at. So yeah, once it got to the point where he said, "Yeah, I'd like to know if this is still available." I had been reading Malarkey Books, what they've been putting out all that time, and my thoughts through that period were, "Oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hang with these guys. This is really good stuff. This is high level material." So to actually be selected, to be asked to publish with Malarkey was it was a huge moment of validation. It was it was a big honor for me because these everybody who I have been reading from Malarkey, I've met several of them in person, and they're wonderful people. But they're pushing the envelope themselves. They are all on top of their game. They've all got or at least they appear to have a very focused idea of what they're out to do, and they're doing it. So it's one of those rare publishing stories with a happy ending for the author, I think, in this case.
Heck yeah. No, this is a good time. Everybody, listeners, of course, I blame myself, but also you. There was something about that title. I had a recent author, poet, essayist, Morgan Parker, and she had a title for some reason remind me of this was other people's discomfort keeps me up at night. There's like there's just something weird. This title like lives with you after you see it. Good work on that. All right, we gotta kick out some conceptual questions. I wanted to know from you, Spencer. you're younger or you're older, you're living, you're going along. Is there a moment where you do something, you say, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, like it hit you like that? Or is that, what's your relationship with that identity?
That is a tricky question, or it's a tricky answer to articulate. I think is really the issue. Um, it's hard. I think that I have always thought of myself as a writer in one way or another. That, my day job has often involved writing. In fact, just about my entire professional quote unquote life. Yeah, I've been a writer of some sort, but there's a difference between technical writing or
Yeah.
copywriting and you know trying to write as part of an artistic process. So I think it was a little bit, it was definitely after my first publications, my first stories were published. Even at first there, I was still of that mindset that, yeah, I might be faking my
Yeah.
way through this. I'm not really sure if this is all going to, just blow up in my face at some point in the relatively near future and expose me for the fraud that I am. Um, so it took a while of me doing that, and I think it wasn't until I started, I've started to take some random classes with places like the Writers Grotto here in San Francisco. I joined the Castro Writers Co-op here, and it was, once I started meeting and talking to and interacting with and sharing work with these people who were much more experienced and established, and many of them had already had several books published, and their reactions to what I was doing convinced me that maybe I was on the right track. And I realized this kind of external validation isn't
Yeah.
always the best thing to rely on, but I do think it's part of that process, at least for me, because I often don't trust my own assessments of what I'm doing. This is why one of the things about publishing that is most frustrating for me is when you are trying to sell a book, you have to tell the prospective agent that you're querying, my book is like these other books, and they have to be,
Yeah.
they're called comps, and your
Yeah.
comps have to be recent, and there's a sweet spot to these. But I don't feel like I'm the best person to tell you what my book is like. I think that somebody else who has read it and who is filtering it through a completely separate uh, set of prior experiences, they're probably in a better place to be able to tell you if my book is more like this one over here or that one over there, or
It's a
perhaps
really tough, not to jump in, but it's a really tough question for an author, because it's like a singular mind. I know my mind, and I know this product of my mind. I don't know what it's like
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and this is something lately I've been thinking about a lot as this technology that they falsely call artificial intelligence has been basically threatening to put writers out of a job. I feel like I can see a potential use for this large language model technology where, yeah, as an author, here's my book. You tell me what
What's
books.
it like?
Give me some comps, man.
What- what's what's this like? Hopefully they're good.
If if someone could come up with that for me, I would pay a reasonable amount of money for the novel that I've got that I've been trying to sell, because
I
that's
think
where I'm stumbling, is the comps.
I think there's something about on this point though, unique mind, or original mind, creative mind. It's not, at least my understanding and my conversations, it's not tied so quickly to what exists in the world. What something is there out in the world already that this is like? And as a matter of fact, it could be a tough process for a creator to immediately be thrown into that, right? Because
Mhm.
immediately, in order to understand me, you need to understand these things. And I think that's part of the difficulty of of the tension. Let's talk a little bit. I mean, because let's just talk about art.
Yeah, let's do that.
And yeah, uh, I think in doing the show, seeing all the examples of creativity out there, people think creativity, people think art, but what we're talking about is art, and some of the your experience of seeing yourself as an artist. Um, what is art? What is art? I mean, for me, I say this: you endeavor yourself, deeply towards this, and it's a difficult discovery process. But what is art? What is the you, the creator, the artist, trying to do? What is art?
Yeah, that's another brutal question that luckily I'm not the first one who's going to try and fail to answer this adequately. I mean, for me, yeah, it's a creative act. It's an intentional creative act that I guess that leaves an emotional impact on its audience that will stay in the mind of the audience after viewing or consuming, or however you want to phrase that. And ideally, it's one that is open to multiple interpretations, however you would want to define meaning for a particular medium. Like trying to offer an interpretation of a novel is much different from trying to offer an interpretation of a symphony or a photographic series or anything like that.
Sure.
So the definition of that's not necessarily going to be consistent from one medium to the next. But when I try to create something, that's ultimately what I am trying to do. I'm trying to make something that resonates, that has an emotional impact, that sticks around, and that people can argue about.
Yeah, I I really enjoy that, and I love the expansive conversation about art. As a writer, do you struggle with saying with your art or what you create? Do you struggle when I write, and I write enough where I can recognize my hangups, and I was very interested in what you had said about how you write consistently. I had this weird experience where I work for a labor union, and I'm a smart guy, and I write smart things, and I write aggressive or solid arguments, and technical with creative flourishes. And I do this all the time. And sometimes you forget when you're paid and you're doing it this way and that way that you're flexing some of those muscles. And I just, I love the process of writing. Do you think if for you, one of the difficulties I have within it is dropping something out there in the universe that is tied, that is that's personal, that is like, oh, can I say that about my relative, or when it's kind of like those type of dynamics? Can I write this sequence that I think everybody's gonna know is me? And it's how is that? How do you work with the process of like putting your thing out there and say, hey world, there it is, because you have another book as well. What's that like for you?
Well, yeah, the other book, the novel that I put out is very different. That's a lot less personal than the story collection to me. The novel was basically that was basically me challenging myself to see if I could write something that as long as a novel, and so
Yeah, yeah.
it's there's personal stuff, or there's stuff that I've drawn from my personal life that's in that book, but not in the same way that I have in this story collection. A lot of these stories are based, at least in some way, on something that has either happened to me or to somebody that I know or somebody that they know. So it's things that have come to me, that have come across my transom during the course of my life. And I used to really I did used to really worry about, you said, oh, can I write this about my family, et cetera, et cetera. There's a story in this book, and this is why I don't really worry about this so much anymore. There's a story in the book, Singapore Song. It is based on the time that my father, when I was a teenager, my father um, took on this personal project of building a sailboat in the garage, and it had to be big enough for 4 people. He had never done anything like this before.
Wowza.
So, yeah, exactly. So that was that's a major thing. It's a major signpost in my early life, is that time when my dad was doing this, because it did take over our lives to the rest of us, to a lesser extent than his, because we weren't actually doing the work and all of that. But I thought, I think about that from time to time. And when I wrote the story, I said, all right, let's see if I start there and change things, and how can I really, how can I stay true to how I felt about that, and true to some other things going on in my life, without rendering this as like a straight up, this is what happened, this is what happened, the names have been changed to protect the innocent. So I thought that this one might be a little too obvious, so I wrote the story anyway. I sent it out. It was published in Appalachia Review a few years ago. And when I sent the manuscript to my parents after it got accepted by Malarkey, so I sent the whole book manuscript. I get a comment from my dad. He says, "Oh yeah, I built a boat in the garage once." But you couldn't recognize yourself in this character? Do you think I just pulled this randomly out of the air?
Do you think everybody does this?
Yeah, and it's at another level, it was actually pretty gratifying, because I didn't really want that guy to be a straight description of my father. in that story, I'm in there twice. I'm both the narrator and the father in a lot of ways. So it's so once that happened, this very obvious reference to a very significant time in my family's life, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I did something just like that." It's like people don't see themselves a lot of times in what you're doing, and that gave me a lot more confidence to keep doing that going forward.
And I love that. There's something within that. It's almost like you think of it in the kind of with the imposter syndrome, or with creativity as far as you creating. But think about it. I had never even thought about the concept of the person who might be encountering and reading it. And like you're saying, it's you, but they can't see themselves either. What a fascinating dynamic. And everybody, How I'm Spending My Afterlife, title of Spencer's, or the novel that he referred to. Although, again, another provocative title is like, now I'm wondering how I'm spending my That's what the show's about, Spencer. Jeez, maybe this is the entire show right here, and I've been fascinated with it, how any of us are spending our life and afterlife. Tell me, tell me what you think the role of art is right now. I know you made some comments about art, but like, we're recording here June 2024. My personal experience this time seems to be moving quickly. A lot of things seem to be changing. We're talking about technology, politics, and everything. And we're always arting as humans, but nowadays, or in general, creating art. What's the role? What do you think the role is, Spencer?
I've always thought the role of art is to ground us in the human experience, and to simultaneously do that, and also deepen and enrich that experience. This is something that it's very difficult for capitalism to commodify, and that's why I think that's why art takes such a back seat in modern culture. But that just because it's difficult to commodify, doesn't mean that it has no value. In fact, it has more value than a thing that can be commodified, in my opinion.
I that's such a big point. I think, like, the way our minds are framed, let's say American culture, capitalism, and art appears in it. I've always wondered, and it's like, I think it creates difficulty for everybody. It is, what's the value, right?
Yeah.
Like what
Yeah.
in our first inclination is like money value, right? That thing must be worth $400,000 or $50 or whatever. And like our mind's trying to value it, like, but I think it can be a challenge, the appearance of artwork in engaging with it outside of money terms, right?
Yeah.
If an artwork, you don't see it having a market value yet, your gift to somebody saved their fucking life by giving it to them. Yeah, what's it worth? That's exactly the point with art. And I think it is a constant tension that you pointed to within what's its value, you know?
Yeah. There was, and it's interesting. I was just reading something yesterday, an old article. It was about a Netflix documentary that had to do with art forgery,
Oh,
and it
yeah,
was the bit I'm thinking of in particular had to do with a guy, or I don't know if it was a guy or if it was a woman. It was somebody anyway who was forging these abstract impressionists. There's a Rothko forgery,
yeah,
uh, and apparently the documentary was focusing on the very, very, very rich people who bought this beautiful painting, and it was a beautiful painting
sure.
in its own right. And then once they found out it was fake, that's when they were furious. It's like, well, you bought the artwork. The artwork is just as beautiful
Fascinating.
as it was before. If it affects you, it should affect you just as it did before, no matter who it was who actually picked up the brush and slapped that paint on. The value should be in the work and not in what we paid for it, what we can get for it, what other people think of us because we threw down so much money on a painting of a square.
Yeah,
But that's exactly right. Our capitalist mindset, American capitalism in particular, just kind of warps us into thinking this way about everything. And we've had all these decades of film and television, basically either directly or indirectly, just propagandizing that whole mindset. I mean, I remember growing up when Wall Street, the movie, was
sure.
big, and that the line from that movie, "Greed is good." And I saw that movie at 15, and I was like, Gordon Gekko is not somebody to be emulated, but everybody I knew was basically quoting that, like, yeah, validation for capitalism, for the mindset. And it's just, so it's we and I feel like, I don't know, maybe this is a triumph of capitalism in and of itself, in that it has marginalized that the view of art as as having a value in and of itself, to where we can no longer generally look at something like that and understand that it's supposed to be satirical, that we're supposed to disagree with this statement. I mean, obviously, a lot of people can, but I'm talking about generally as a society, when these things kind of take hold and replicate themselves, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there's a powerful dynamic there that maybe part of the philosophy and part of the show is getting at, like, the question, like, how do you value things, and what is their meaning outside of a market system, right? So,
Yeah,
like, um and I think that's a very difficult thing to do, because as we, whether we interface with reality through social media and all this type of things, by and large, we do get excited. We do participate in numbers. We do participate in, like, holy shit, that's a really good song. And they have 50,000 followers, or that's a great song and they have 5 followers. Is
yeah,
this legitimate? How should I feel about it? Like,
right.
it's in our head. Or we had this yesterday. I'm hanging out with my kids and we're looking at something. I'm watching this show, the complete underground show. I don't know where it was from. Young students, screamo metal, like, mind blowing execution, performance, everything. It's like 150 views on this. And for me, I got focused on that because I'm like, I think when this happens in our experience, it's always like, what does it mean? Is there a purveyor that says this is good, right? The
Right.
comps that you talk about with your books. Well, Jurassic Park was a good book, and this book is a good book, like Jurassic Park is. Like, it's so difficult, I think, sometimes not to pontificate, but just to be dealing with the art display, the art object
Yeah, it is.
unto itself.
And it goes back to that external validation that I was talking about. I require it sometimes just as an artist to make sure that I'm on the right track, but
Yeah.
even as a member of the audience for a piece of art, we all do that too. We all look for external validation. Are other people enjoying this?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Does this suck, or is it great and nobody knows about it yet? It's hard, it's hard to tell. And for whatever reason, we care about this. And I wish that, and I'm absolutely putting myself in this category too, but I wish we could just learn to trust our own instincts and opinions on these things a lot more readily. Absolutely with me too. I am guilty of this as well.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy talking to you about this, Spencer. It's within the show, I liked a lot of space that I can move into, but I'm really connecting with a lot of your points and kind of like the journey of the artist. Hey, quick aside, because I throw in some randos here. I saw you writing a bunch about some great music. Are you a music fiend? What do you dig on when you obsess? You obsessed with the writing and reading, I'm sure, but like, what do you dig on?
Oh man, music is such a buffet for me. I mean, there's just so much that I'll latch onto for a while and then latch on to something else. The I guess the constants for me. I like a lot of jazz, and
Yeah.
I've been a metal fan. I'm a little bit picky on the metal side, but I've been a
I'm
metal fan since
interested.
I was a teenager. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's I'm really like these days I'm really enjoying a lot more instrumental metal, like
Yeah.
Pelican, if you're familiar with them.
I know Pelican. I saw them live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, not a billion years ago, a while ago. I know Pelican.
I've never seen them live. One of my good friends tells me he found them very disappointing in person, but yeah, and I listen to them a lot. There is just something about the heaviness and
Yeah.
the complete lack of vocals, just forcing me to concentrate on the power of the sonic power of what they are generating, and yeah, I love it. It's very invigorating to me.
Hey, on the music too, is a good friend of mine. His name's Todd. He actually got me into Pelican, but very influential on me because I was very much I need words. I'm used to words, and he was kind of like, fuck all that noise. Like, join me on my journey of not needing them as much. And
Yeah.
through that process, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about music, and even to this very day, particularly within the metal genre, like listening and jazz too. I've been listening a ton of McCoy Tyner, which I
Oh yeah.
hadn't, like I like to drop in and keep going, and lately I've been really digging on that. All right, so I knew you were really digging on the music there, and hey, big question.
Yeah.
Why is there something rather than nothing? I can't let you go before you take a stab at what some people call the question.
Yeah, I knew that was coming, and I didn't prepare anything for it.
Hey, it's too big. You could prepare 1,000 hours or a minute.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question that I've thought about off and on for a long time in various different incarnations. I think everybody thinks about this at some point. Everybody with a certain level of awareness, and yeah, man, I just can't get past. It's just it exists. It exists randomly, but the fact that it exists, that obligates us to do something with it.
I like that. I've liked to use the poles of nothing versus something. Looking at religion and philosophy, I think.
Yeah.
Buddhism, we think about standard, science, Big Bang, and all that. And I just love the creation of things. That's what it is for me. And
Yeah.
and writing has a really special spot. Spencer, before we allow you to depart, can you tell us? I mean, you're talking about the book, where to find the book. Could you make sure you lead folks to places where they can find your work, or ways, suggested ways to interact with you or the work, or anything like that?
Yeah. There is my website, spencerfleury.com. I kept that simple, just for this exact reason. And on there are links to to other social media, and the like. I do have a newsletter that I have let kind of sit for a while, but I'm planning to have something out on that very soon. A link to that is also at my website, spencerfleury.com. So just, if you are interested in finding out more about me, or telling me how awful you think my work is, whatever it is that you might want to do, that's the best way to do it.
No, it's been, I've enjoyed reading your work, Spencer, and I'm excited. I'm excited for the new work coming out. I'm gonna the local bookstore here in Albany, Oregon, Browser's bookstore, stocks the authors that I have on the show. So,
all right,
yeah, it's a great thing. Was a bookstore, local used bookstore. They do mail order stuff, and they'd been closed for a little bit, or revamping. And I don't know. I think you might recognize this reality, Spencer, in the U.S. You got your big cities and stuff like that. You got your bookstores. There's once you get to a smaller city or smaller towns, and finding the good book is not something to be taken for granted today's. If you want to go into a bookstore and have your mind wander into that bookstore experience, it's a really nice blessing here in Albany, Oregon, to have Browsers, and I'll make sure that they're stocked up on Spencer Fleury as well.
Love to hear it.
It's so great. Spencer, great chat with you. Best of luck on the new book. Keep digging in on what you're doing. I really enjoyed talking about art, philosophy, and hopefully, if you see Pelican, hopefully you get a chance to see Pelican. To drop down to Pelican, I saw them. Small club, I think it was South Milwaukee, quite a long time ago, but it was very much part of where my friend Todd was like. Even on the metal stuff, is like, listen, just listen. Just listen.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for your scream. The music, just settle into it. So it's good to settle into art and enjoy it. Spencer, thanks for coming on the show. Real great pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I was a little intimidated about the idea of talking about philosophy, but this has been a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey, philosophy for the people. That's what I say with this show. I've been to the academic route. Philosophy for the people. People are talking all the time about, why the fuck are we doing this? Why are we here? What do we do? Should I create this? Should I sell this? Should I keep this?
Exactly.
Thanks, Spencer. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you. See you.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
And listeners, to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind the scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.